Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Islam in Life with me, Reza Ghazim. Happiness is a mental state of well-being characterized by positive or pleasant emotions. But is that the true and all-encompassing definition of happiness? What is real happiness in the Islamic context? And how can true happiness be achieved? Is it possible to be happy all of the time? Is that even necessary?
Each and every human being instinctively is in pursuit of happiness. Having the best of worldly possessions may temporarily bring one pleasure, but this can never guarantee long-term happiness. Happiness comes from being satisfied with little and placing one's attention and focus on bigger, non-material values. These include the pleasure of Allah and the pleasure of fellow human beings. Allah has promised the believers, men and women, gardens under which rivers flow to dwell therein forever, and beautiful mansions in gardens of paradise. But the greatest happiness is the good pleasure of Allah. That is the supreme success. This solution in today's life often is seen to be too simplistic, as the world has moved more towards the era of individualism and instant gratification. Everyone wants to be happy, and we go about trying to find happiness for ourselves at any cost, not realizing that the very idea of trying to please oneself at any cost is the doom to happiness. Happiness comes when we stop thinking about ourselves, when we put Allah and others first. Giving others happiness is a means to achieving the happiness ourselves. And when we put Allah's pleasure as a focus of our lives, then the very concept of happiness is turned around its head. For a believer who is in pursuit of the pleasure of his Lord, even the outward hardships of this life bring on the bliss in the heart that has been submitted to its Lord.
We're honored to be joined by our esteemed guest, Professor Tariq Ramadan, to discuss all of these issues. Welcome to the program, Professor.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam. I want to find out a little bit more about what happiness is. I mean, is there a Quranic reference to this specific word, happiness?
In fact, if you come back to the Quran, and even if you come back to the prophetic tradition, the word sa'ada, which is the translation, direct translation for happiness, is not per se. There is only one occurrence in the Quran, but it's not connected to sa'ada in itself. Is that they are going to be happy and in this way. What we find in the Islamic tradition, based on the concept of happiness, is not directly coming from the scriptural sources, the Quran and the prophetic tradition. It's coming from the Greek influence, because the notion of sa'ada, happiness, is everywhere in the Platonian and then the post-Platonian era and philosophy. So we had in the Islamic tradition, from the Shia and the Sunni philosophers, people bringing this into the Islamic tradition, saying, yes, we have exactly the same, is that happiness is the ultimate goal of our life. In fact, this is a Greek influence into our tradition. If you come back to the scriptural sources, there are two things that are important. The first is that the ultimate purpose of our life is not happiness as it was put in the Greek tradition. It's in fact this state of peace, this inner peace, salamat al-nafs. And in fact, if we have to talk about happiness, is when your heart is at peace. And you have it in the Quran, ala bidhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. Is it not with the remembrance of God that your hearts are getting this tranquility, this state of peace, which is the translation of happiness in spiritual terms?
Can I just interject here and just ask, so within the Greek tradition, how did that differ from this very specific Quranic terminology that you're using or interpreting?
That's a good question, because in fact, there are two things that are different. The first is the ultimate goal is happiness, is to be happy. While in Islam, the ultimate goal is to be at peace. Happiness is the consequence of you being at peace, meaning you are at peace when you are with God. So in the Greek tradition, without the transcendence and without God, you are happy when you control yourself, when part of your soul is controlling everything which is coming from the body. So because you have the soul and the body, everything which is coming from the body might be problematic and can destroy or at least destabilize your being. So you have to control. So when the power of your reason is controlling the temptations of your body, this is where you are getting this happiness. So there is something which is similar, because it has to do with controlling. It has to do with the ethical. In fact, what is common in the two traditions is that the ethical has to do with the aesthetic, and the aesthetic has to do with happiness. So there is something which is beauty and ethics are coming together. So we have things that are common, but the ultimate goal is different, because the first source is different, is that we are getting this happiness out of this peace that you have with Him, not only with yourself, not only by controlling your own self and controlling your body, and you're controlling and getting out to your soul. So it's apparently a small difference, but it's an essential difference.
Now, what motivates in the Greek tradition, so we're digressing here slightly, but what motivates this controlling of the body? Because that's about, it sounds similar to controlling the nafs, in a sense. So why would the Greeks want to do that if there was no ultimate being, as it were, to answer to?
It's the whole Greek tradition has, not all the Greek tradition, by the way, what we have with the first philosopher, Socrates, and then the whole tradition with Aristotle, is, in fact, if you follow your body, if you follow the temptations coming from your physical side, you are going to be lost in ethical terms. So in fact, it has to do with coming back to the essential component of your being, which is the soul. So there are things that are similar, but from an Islamic perspective, it's not similar because we are following in the footsteps of the Greek tradition. Is that the Greek tradition is coming back to something which is essential in the fitrah, in what the way we were created. In fact, what the Greek was saying is something which is essential that we find, with the difference that for us it's coming from the monotheistic tradition, which is coming back to the origin. To the point, for example, that we find in the Greek tradition that there is a natural attraction of human beings, whoever they are, towards what is the good and what is the right. In the Islamic tradition, we have exactly this. We are saying exactly this. And you have it in the Quran, in Surah Al-Hujurat, وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ حَبَّبَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْإِيمَانَ وَزَيَّنَهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. God made you love faith, and He beautified it in your heart. So there is an aesthetical dimension that is attractive. So we agree on this, but not because we are following in the footsteps of the Greek tradition, but because the Greek tradition is coming back to some of the very important dimension of what the human fitrah, the woman essential attractions toward the transcendence. So we might differ in some of our priorities, and the essential one is, in fact, happiness is not the ultimate goal. Peace is the ultimate goal. Salam is the ultimate goal. And out of this, being at peace with yourself, this is why you are going to have this kind of happiness. Add to this that there is one word which is so important in the Islamic tradition, which is not sa'ada, that we can find. For example, you had somebody who tried to link between this and this. Miskawayh was trying from the Greek tradition saying happiness, but he was adding the Sufi tradition by saying Allah's love. So being loved by Allah is the way you are going to get this happiness. So he's linking the transcendental dimension related to the oneness of God to the Greek tradition that was talking about happiness. But in between these two, there is one word. But you have it 5 times a day when we have the people calling you to pray. Hayya ala al-falah. Falah is success. Success is salvation. So in fact, the ultimate goal with peace, helping you to get this happiness, is in fact this being saved, to go through your own salvation. And it's connected here to your relationship to God.
Now, if we move forward slightly and look at the current secular dimension of how happiness is defined, and the Islamic definition of happiness, or the more nuanced kind of approach that you've outlined here, are there similarities and differences as there were in the Greek, or is this different?
Yes, there are lots of differences, and in fact there are as many differences with the Greek tradition that we have with the monotheistic traditions, because in your introduction you were talking about the emotional side of happiness. And in fact there is something here which is drastically different, which is the difference between emotional happiness and spiritual happiness. Emotional happiness could be, for example, you have an emotion, and we know now how our brain is working. Neurosciences are telling us it's coming from the stimulus or stimuli that are coming from and working on our brain. So when you react to this external stimuli, playing with your brain, if you do what it's coming from outside in an emotional way, you can find a state of happiness, but in emotional terms. So, for example, you feel it, do it. Be happy. That's the slogan of the consumer society. You feel it, do it. That's not the spiritual happiness we are talking about. You feel it, master it, and know if you want to do it. It has to do with your consciousness. It has to do with your own decision. Emotional happiness, reacting to stimulus coming from outside, is still to be dependent. It's a kind of addiction that you can have. So you can be happy and addicted in Islam and in all the spiritual and in the Greek philosophy. There is no way of being happy if you are addicted or dependent. You have to master. It's out of your peace and freedom. Freedom and peace. That's the most important thing. So we have to be very cautious with the people who are working on, advertisement. They work with psychological input to know how to take your brain and to make you feel happy, but out of this very superficial way you deal with your own self. The spiritual journey is completely different.
Very interesting points. We like to keep this show as interactive as possible and really value your opinion. Here is what you sent us this week.
This week we asked, how can we achieve true happiness? Mohammed from UK said, there is no true happiness for a believer in this world. We are told this world is full of challenges for believers, but their reward of true happiness will be in the hereafter. Julius from Ghana said, happiness comes from putting others before ourselves. When you concentrate on making others happy, your heart will automatically glow with happiness. And Sarah from USA said, happiness is guaranteed when we put Allah's pleasure before anything else in life. Trying to attain the pleasure of Allah brings one true happiness.
Well, anybody can be happy. As long as you believe in Allah and you have faith in Allah, then you know that eventually whatever you want and ask for, whatever you wish for, it will come to you. But you have to be patient. And happiness is there for you, but you don't have to look far for it, but it's there. But don't be impatient.
It's basically to please the Creator, God, Allah. That is the basic concept of Islam, and to spread the good news about being able to do that. Whatever that might be. It might be in your job, it might be how you treat your family, it might be how you are with your neighbors, but basically to spread happiness and to worship God in the best way we know how.
To pray Allah and to be obedient, to help Allah's creation, human being, and the people who are suffering, who are needy, and who needs help.
That's all the comments we have for this week. If you'd like to have your views featured in the show, be sure to follow us on Facebook or join us on Twitter. Now you can send your own videos with your comments and even your questions to islamandlife@presstv.com.
According to some of the clips that we just saw, what we're seeing is that some people view the altruistic nature of the human being as the key to happiness. So the fact that they're helping other people, that's what makes them happy. I mean, to what extent is that true?
It is. It is very important. What we were saying just before the clip about, emotional happiness, it has to do with you feel it, you do it. It's very much about yourself. It's very much about individualistic way of dealing with your own self. What we are talking about when we come to mastering yourself or mastering the bad temptation and trying to get this inner peace, when you want to get this inner peace, the way you are going to deal with your own self, to liberate yourself from the self, is by giving. It's by serving the people. And this is why there is a connection in Islam between as-salam, al-istislam, and serving the people, to the point that the Prophet said, the best among you is the best for all human beings. It's the most useful person. خَيْرُكُمْ أَنْفَعُكُمْ لِلنَّاسِ, the best among you. Meaning what? That you are nurturing your faith, you are nurturing your connection with God in the way you are serving people. So by serving, there is a state where you come back to the self and you liberate yourself from your own personal concerns to give. So to give is the path towards happiness. And even with knowledge, for example, you can have an intellectual happiness. When you get knowledge, what are you going to do with your knowledge? To keep it for yourself. The only real dimension with knowledge is to learn and to teach. But you learn to teach. You don't only learn to keep it for yourself. So you learn to change yourself and you teach to change the world, to change the people around you. So this is the way you deal with teaching. This is the way you deal with poor people. You get some money to serve the people. For example, the pillar of Islam that has to do with zakat, you can get money, but you have to give, because this is the poor's rights on your own wealth. All these dimensions, everything which has to do with this sa'ada has to do with al-falah, which is salvation and success. And the success is you're not going to be successful by your own self. You have to give, you have to serve, and you have to be useful.
Now, is there a time where one could argue that there could be a permanent state of happiness within the Islamic framework? I mean, can that happen?
Never. Never, and that's very important. Even, in the mystical tradition, even in, when there is this fusion, that the people are talking about fana, that you are very close to Allah, that you come so close to the essence of life that you are close to God. These are instants. It's not permanent. It's never. And in fact, there is something which is understandable in this. You cannot get this sense of peace if you are not going through troubles. So Karl Marx was saying once, everything is state, there is no state. If there is everything is happiness, there is no happiness. Happiness is what you can get. So this is why al-khushu', for example, this very deep connection that you have with God is not permanent. It's something that you can feel once, that you can get from time to time, and this is why you understand that this is your goal. This is something that you can get as a privilege, knowing that you need to deal with your life at the average state, which is struggling and trouble. So our natural and permanent state is much more about being in trouble and dealing with our troubles, to get instance of peace as signals, as symbols, as images and parables, that what is going to be an eternal state of peace. But this is not in this world. This is in the hereafter, inshallah.
Okay, let's move to the hereafter, not right in this program, but let's move towards that. What happens beyond this life? I mean, is happiness in that interim period? What state is that going to be? From all, not accounts, but from what you hear from the religious tradition, it's not going to be a very happy period for most people.
No, that's something we have also to be very careful with some people saying, azab al-qabr, when you are going to be buried, and there is a time where you are going to go through difficult times. We don't have all the details for this, and what we know is just try to be the best and try to behave in the best way. And when it comes to you being alone, waiting for the day of judgment, it's between you and God. And the best for us who are alive is to pray for the people who are in this situation, and not to go too far by, I think that our insistence, and sometimes we are overemphasizing the difficulties during this period of time in between. It's as if, be careful. We are spreading fear. I don't think that's we need to think about it, but I think that spreading fear and
perhaps
saying,
you don't, others might.
I don't what?
Don't need to be as fearful.
No, I think that, we were talking about being positive also, and relying on Allah's mercy, on relying on the fact that His mercy comes before His wrath, and I think that this is also, no one should be arrogant and think, oh yes, I get it, it's going to be fine with me. No one, even the Prophet ﷺ was very cautious with this. So he was praying, and even his wife was saying, are you not exaggerating, because all your sins are going to be forgiven? And say, أَفَلَا أَكُونُ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا, I have to thank God. So we should get this sense that it's never enough. We have to go and to do more and more, but still not being obsessed with the punishment, and let us hope with His mercy and get a sense that we can go beyond, and we can be successful, that we can get this falah that He's calling us to respond to.
Now, within this concept of happiness and moving beyond that interim period to hopefully Jannah, what would the context of happiness and so on be within that setting?
In fact, it's the same in the way where when, for example, in this life, you are happy with what you have, as it was said in the clip, when you master yourself, when there is a sense of stability and balance, al-mizan, that what you want is what you have, and what you have is enough for what you want. This is a state of peace that you get, this inner peace. In the hereafter, the projection, the image, the symbols, and the way it's presented in the Quran is, you will get everything you want. So there is what you want, you will get it. So there is once again a balance between your desires and what you will get. And this is the definition of the paradise. The paradise is no need. No need means at peace. At peace means happy in spiritual term. But there is something that we need to get, that some scholars were talking about the fact that we are doing things that are good because we want the paradise. So once again, we give in order to be rewarded. But there is a step further that we need to get. The ultimate success is when your ultimate desire is to see Him, is to be in His presence. Allahumma mata'na bir-ru'yati ila wajhika al-karim. Oh, give us this pleasure, this happiness to see You, to be in Your presence, which has nothing to do with reward. It's beyond that. So what we can understand here is that there are qualities of happiness, densities, natures that are different. So it's a step by step. You always start by giving, hoping that somebody is going to say thank you. And at the end, the ultimate goal of this happiness with Him is, I give, and I'm not expecting a thank you. It's just for His sake, for His love. And this is why I was telling you, Miskawe was putting this as the ultimate goal, Allah's love. At the end, all what you are trying to do is to love Him and to be loved by Him. And this is the ultimate happiness for human beings.
Very poignant point. Happiness is arguably an inner state of being which needs to be cultivated. What triggers happiness in each individual depends on what has been nurtured by the religious spirit. The need to help others to have happiness is an important part of what motivates the contentment in the individual. That's all the time we have for today. I would like to thank Professor Tariq Ramadan for joining us, and I thank you all at home for watching. Until next time, goodbye.